we would have been fine at 5.
Have we started? Time?
No.
Okay. All right, it is 6:30 PM. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And Renee, if you could please call roll.
Ms. Williford,
Here.
Mr. Jean, Mr. McDaniel,
Here.
Ms. Byrd,
Here?
Ms. Zink, Mr. Beck,
Here.
Ms. Bahan,
Here.
Mr. Jablonski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving to consent items. Number 1, approval or amendment of the September 9th, 2021 regular Planning Commission minutes. And does any member of the commission wish to remove any member from the consent docket? Does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? I'll take a motion
So moved.
Second.
and a vote.
Okay. Whoops. You may vote. Okay, everyone has voted and the motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Moving to non-consent items, we have item 2R2122-31, Sooner Traditions LLC and Hunter Miller Family LLC request amendment of the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan from office designation and low-density residential designation to commercial designation for 1.33 acres of property located at the northeast corner of South Berry Road and West Lindsay Street, 1027 and 1035 South Berry Road. And item 3, O-2122-15, Sooner Traditions LLC and Hunter Miller Family LLC requesting rezoning from R1 Single Family Dwelling District and CO Suburban Office Commercial District to SPUD Simple Planned Unit Development for approximately 1.33 acres of property located at the northeast corner of South Berry Road and West Lindsay Street, 1027 and 1035 South Berry Road. We'll take a staff presentation.
Hi, Laura Hoggett from the Planning Department. So we have an application from Sooner Traditions LLC and Hunter Miller Family LLC for a 2025 land use plan amendment from office and low density residential designation to commercial designation. Is this better? All right. So the southern portion of the lot is currently office designation with the northern portion low density residential. To the west and the south is commercial. And then the rest is low density residential. They're proposing commercial for the full tract. They're also requesting rezoning from R1 Single Family Dwelling District and CO Suburban Office Commercial District to SPUD, Simple Planned Unit Development, at 1027 and 1035 South Berry Road. This is one lot, it just has dual zoning. So the north portion is R1 with the south being CO. To the west there's office and commercial. Catty corner is commercial, to the south is commercial, and then there's R1 surrounding the other sides. Currently, all the other corners of the intersection are commercial developments with single-family residential around the other sides. So currently the lot has 2 structures. On the north side is a residential lot, and then to the south is, a residential structure, with an office on the south part there on the corner. This is looking at the subject property north across Lindsay, and then looking east on Lindsay there at the corner. Sorry, these pictures are kind of dark. The southwest corner where a gas station is currently closed down and vacant. And then the northwest corner, there's a gas station that's vacant, and then right now they have like a hail repair company there doing hail repair. And then on the southeast corner is Penny Hill, a restaurant, and then a parking lot just to the south. Here's the proposed site development plan. They're proposing a building closest to the corner with parking on the north and east sides. They're proposing a 6-foot fence around the perimeter with landscaping buffers all around. Whoop. And then we did receive 12.5% protest and 17.8% support within the notification area. And then I'm available for questions, and the applicant has a presentation as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? And seeing none, we'll move to the applicant presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sean Rieger, representing the applicant. If you don't mind, I'm going to take that off so I can speak. Thank you very much. Sean Rieger, representing the applicant in this case. And this is, you're familiar with the corner, Lindsay and Berry. This is a corner that's seen a lot of activity over the years. It's been a corner that has been proposed for change a number of times. And I think it has evolved to tonight to where we think we've got it to where we've heard comments suggest how they want the corner designed for really the past couple of years. And we've evolved this project to get to that point where we believe we packaged it up in a way that handles all of those concerns. So I want to take you through it. It's about 1.3 acres, the total combined lot. Actually, this is 2 lots in one way, but it's really one lot. It was apparently subdivided many years ago without the subdivision process. So there's 2 different zonings on it for that reason, but the city recognizes it as one lot still. So it's shown as one lot. That's kind of confusing. It doesn't really affect your decision tonight much, but it's one lot of 1.3 acres. The corner you see there is Lindsay and Berry. This is an aerial of it, and you see the large vacant field to the east. Across the street is a vacant field, although that is zoned commercial and office and 2025 planned full commercial. I'll show you that in a minute. But you can see Lindsay Street, we all know, has been divided now, and a significant landscape project up and down Lindsay Street that happened in recent years, and now it's complete and it's ready to continue on with its new day. The zoning, the current zoning is on the left, and you see the outline of the red on the right there. This is all commercial red zoning that you see on the left. The orange is kind of hard to see the coloring here, but the orange is either multifamily or office. This is office basically on these corners, on this corner and down below the Penny Hill site to the south. We are recommending SPUD, which would incorporate C1 uses, and I'll take you through the details of that in just a few minutes. And on the right is the current 2025, and you can see all the corners are commercial, red 2025, full commercial, except for this one corner. So our proposal would be to change that one corner to commercial. We believe there's a natural line that basically carries across the north, and you see between the commercial and the single family, and we believe it lines up with that. I'll show you how we've even pulled that line down further within our site, intentionally with a 90-foot setback to try to keep it with no verticality. And on the south, it is all solid commercial in 2025. So we simply want to keep the corner, make the corner the same as all the other 3 corners that are on 2025. And there is what we think is a natural line of progression. You see the large commercial project to the west. And if you take that yellow dashed line and just carry it basically straight across, that's what we intend to be the continuation of that line. To the south is the commercial down here. Take that line around its commercial parking lot, which was redone in recent years. That was a zoning that was done a few years back, and the compromise on that zoning was basically that the zoning of the parking lot on the south would just be for a parking lot, and effectively that's what we've done tonight. I'll show you how we've done basically the same thing that was done on the south to make sure there is just a parking lot towards the neighborhood and the commercial is just on the corner. That's effectively what we propose. We believe this is ripe for redesign and reuse and redevelopment and revitalization. All of those apply here, I think, because of the street project of Lindsay. The intersection was enlarged and improved and beautified, and you can see the throats of both Berry and Lindsay as it fronts our site were widened at these locations to anticipate a larger intersection and more of a flow into and out of the beautified Lindsay Street. This site fronts those areas that were widened on Berry and Lindsay Street. So we believe it's appropriate to use it for commercial and to not use it for R1. And R1 is what the one site, again, it's whether it's 2 sites or 1, the north end of this property is zoned R1. We don't believe that's an appropriate use for the north end of this property by any stretch of the imagination. That is the view. If you were to live in a house in that site, as you see on the lower right here, under R1, if you look across the street and you're resting in the yard, playing sports in the yard or whatever, that is your view across the street is a commercial, 2025 commercial corner and a gas station and the side of a commercial building. We don't believe that's appropriate for R1, and we believe we can beautify it with this project and make it a more appropriate use. One of the key points is the traffic. It is an enormous traffic count at this location. This is a large traffic count. When you look at the traffic counts around Norman and you consider the amounts of cars and vehicles that travel here, this is ACOG. This is a graphic from the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments. They maintain this data for everybody. It used to be cities maintained it on their own, but now ACOG does that for everybody. And these are the counts. It's hard to read, so I put the red numbers on top of it. You can see it. So the counts are 19,231 vehicles per day on Lindsay right by the intersection and 7,600 cars per day on Berry right next to this property. So the way you work on these counts is you combine those two numbers because theoretically those are two different directions going through the same intersection. And so roughly we have somewhere in the 20,000s of cars a day going through this intersection, either somewhere between 20 to 24, 25, or 26 if you added those two numbers together. So that is a large traffic count, huge traffic running through this intersection every day. So what has happened with the design? We were before you in pre-development meetings a couple of times here, or several times, and the project has evolved. On the upper left was the original project as it came through. And that project had a building in the middle of the site, and it had parking all the way around it. That's the upper left design. It had a dumpster on the north end, and it had 5-foot landscape spaces around the east side and the north side. And 5 foot is the typical standard for commercial development. You have to do a 5-foot strip of landscaping on the sides. So that was what was brought. We heard a lot of comments about that, a lot of comments about the dumpster too close to the neighborhood, not enough green space on the north or the east, the building and the parking being all around the building. We had a patio on the north end of that property. We heard a lot of comments about that's too close to the neighborhood. So we took all those comments, the designers did, into the next site, which is in the middle, the upper middle there. And you see that one was where the building shifted to the upper right. And then we have large amount of green space around the building to the upper right. The building not serviced or accessed from the back. The thinking there was that that would actually be little activity around the north side by the neighborhood, and so perhaps that would be more tolerable. We heard that basically the building then was too close to the neighbors, but we also heard a key comment that we heard from a lot of people, including policymakers and others, that sort of along the lines of Center City and form-based code and modernized planning, that people wanted the building down on the corner. We heard a lot of comments that people wanted the building on the corner, not the parking on the corner. That the building should be what addresses the corner and keeps the walkability and makes it a vibrant corner, not a parking lot. And so the next shift was to the design, the third design in, and then we did that. So we took the building to the corner, we took the dumpster all the way down, we added larger open space, we eliminated the patio on the north. We handled a lot of those issues in that design and started to talking to policymakers and planners and seeing what the reaction was. And that got very close, I think. One of the comments we heard, though, was Lindsay Street traffic access, that perhaps we needed to deal with an intersection of a right-in, right-out, and consider that. So we went to the traffic engineers, we talked to them, and they agreed that a right-in, right-out would work on the south side on Lindsay Street, and so that evolved to that. Then we went to work on the architecture of the building, and I'll show you more about the architecture in just a moment. But what we went to work, and so this site on the right is the current site, and what we have come up with, and this is a Rick Mckinney design project, so Mckinney Architecture, who's well known for his architecture around the community and does a lot of work at OU and otherwise, and a heavily respected architect. I'm sorry he couldn't be here tonight. He's in Florida tonight on a trip, so he wasn't able to attend. So You get me instead to talk through the architecture on this, but Rick Mckinney designed this, and what we did very intentionally in the SPUD document, the governing zoning document, we put in massive building setbacks. Now, a normal building setback on a commercial property like this, or even residential, is a very minimal side yard setback and a very minimal rear yard setback. On this one, and a building setback is anything vertical. So a building setback is basically any building, outbuilding, accessory building, the dumpster enclosure, anything like that cannot go into the building setback. About the only thing that can go into the building setback is parking, horizontal on the site space. So what we did and governed it into the SPUD is a 90-foot building setback. And this is what I was talking about in that basically we mimicked what was done on the south side of Lindsay, where it was approved as a compromise to have the restaurant on the corner and parking south of it. We've effectively done the same thing. And with the building setback being 90 feet, we are prohibited from building anything on the north side of this property within 90 feet of the residence. And 90 feet would be a pretty typical dimension for an R1 single-family lot. So effectively, we have taken the north end of this site and made it a no-building zone besides the parking lot with that setback. We did the same thing on the east side of the property. We put a 45-foot setback on the east side of the property. And the reason it's 45 feet is because of the dumpster location, my pointer will work, which is now all the way down south by Lindsay Street, far away from the residential area to the north. So we have a 45-foot setback on the east side, 90-foot setback on the north side. Some other aspects are we have the full stockade fencing around the perimeter, 6 feet, and we have very large landscape buffers around the north and the side and the back corner. And we're maintaining the mature trees that are along the north side and the side. We will leave those in that landscape buffer. Now that landscape buffer, again, normally is 5 feet by code. It's dimensioned there to 20 feet, 6 inches. And on the right side, it's dimensioned to, I think it's 15 feet or 16 feet. I'm sorry, I can't read that. I believe it's 15 feet. And so that is a large setback for those locations, but in a good way, that will allow for large trees and growth of vegetation along those edges. We've left a large corner of vegetation. We could pack parking all the way back into that corner right there and more right here and make that a pretty small rectangle. We didn't intentionally. We took the parking and put it in other places so that we left a large corner and that we intend to keep as very mature trees and add more trees into that corner to make it a very robust landscape buffer in that backside. Then we are adding a sidewalk all the way down Berry. There is no sidewalk right there right now. So we're adding a sidewalk along that edge, and we add pedestrian access from the sidewalk, sorry, this point, there we go, into the site right here. And we have the sidewalk along Lindsay. That is an existing sidewalk that then we will carry a bike and access, a pedestrian pad and bike access in from Lindsay Street into this area with bike racks right here. Just off of Lindsay Street, so we're encouraging the green lane space of the Lindsay Street to be used as bikes. Around the front edge, we have the 25-foot landscape area. That's the building setback too. 25 feet is a large building setback. We wanted to make sure that we didn't come any closer to the street than residential or office could. We didn't want to impede any closer, so we focused our standards on this project to make sure that we are more restrictive than anything that could be done from a commercial C1 standpoint. The building is restricted to 1 story in height, and we've shown the building with residential style roofing, and I'll show you a little more about that in a minute. There are 3 large mature trees along Lindsay Street. Very intentionally, those are to be left and will be left, and we believe those will be a strong element with the building, and I'll show you in just a moment how those will interact with the building. So parking is around the side in the back here, and mansard roofs that will be shingled across the project. So this is Rick Mckinney's work. This is looking from Berry Road, looking south, and you can see those trees are to scale right there on Lindsay Street. He put those in. And the project is to be very intimate, low, 1-story building, shingled roof, looking like the roof of a residence, and taken down to the level and scale of a residential project, using brick, stone, ephes, and storefront, as you can see on Berry Road. This would not be accessed on Berry Road. This would be accessed on the other side from the parking lot, but that would be the visual from Berry Road as you travel south and as it addresses the street. And a lot like the modern planning, it brings out to the street and addresses the street in a residential scale. This is looking west on Lindsay Street, looking towards the Berry intersection. And you can see, again, this is Rick McKinney's work. Again, the residential roof. So if you are over on the east side of the project looking in, you would see the residential style roofing on this project, low scale with heavy landscaping all around it. The dumpster enclosure right there with heavy landscaping all around it. And again, one story. This is the side from the parking lot that would be the customer entrance for these stores. You see the bus stop right here, and this is the right in, right out on Lindsay Street. The bus stop would just be shifted slightly. It doesn't have to be moved much, but it can still stay generally in that same location. And this is something we're proud of. I think Rick's done a great job on this. This is the corner of Lindsay and Berry. And so what he has done is taken the building and wrapped the corner, taking it right out to as close as we can to stay within the 25-foot building setback, which is what the setback is under the office and R1. Keep it at that, not impede any further, but bring the building right to it, put a patio on the corner, on the hard corner right by Berry and Lindsay, keep the residential style roof wrapping around the corner and addressing that corner with the activity right on the other side of the building. The neighborhood that's protested is all the way back across on the other side of the building to the northeast. So we're proud of this project. We think that addresses the corner very well in a nice intimate scale that protects the trees on Lindsay and gives it some activity on Lindsay. That is exactly what Lindsay Street has been looking for in its revitalization. There is a protest, obviously, that you're aware of. The protest is generally from the northeast, from Cary Drive and the residences to the northeast. This project has tried exceptionally hard to make sure that we have protected that neighborhood to the northeast. And I've just talked through basically all that we've done, but I want to just reiterate it again. As you can see, we have pushed all of the vertical elements southeast to the corner. And in fact, if you take a line from the front side of the commercial building to the west, straight east, we are in front of the building that is to the west. We've kept it as tight as we can to the south. If you take a line from Penny Hill to the south, straight up, we've kept the building in line with that as well. So we've pushed the building as far to the southeast as we possibly can, getting it away from the neighborhood. I would also suggest that this site drops to the south by several feet. So actually from the northeast to the south, this site slopes away from the neighborhood. And so actually the building will slope down with it. We'll be a few feet lower than the neighborhood to the northeast, helping us with the scale of that. We will have full cutoff lighting, and the PUD incorporates that. We want to make sure there's no confusion about that. The commercial lighting ordinance the city of Norman has is incorporated into the PUD, and that requires, I'll show you a little more, but that requires a full cutoff fixture and a photometric plan. So there will be no spillover of lighting. We have the opaque fence on the border around it. We have the large landscape buffers, the mature trees, the dumpster to the south, residential one-story shingled roof only, and the only exterior use allowed anywhere would be on the far corner on the intersection, nowhere else. There wouldn't be any other use allowed anywhere on it. Stormwater drains to the south-southwest, and intentionally we have kept the maximum impervious to 65%, which is an R1 single-family residential standard. So we wouldn't have any more impervious square footage than could be done on an R1 single-family site. And C1 is the uses that we have basically incorporated into this project. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. So again, I've shown you that, the building taken as far southwest as we could to line it up with Penny Hill and keep it lined up with the building to the west. Let me go back here. Bringing the building to the street, this is something that, this is a graphic from 2025, the implementation memo of 2025. So it's a graphic that's been around for a long time, but it basically instructs what we're starting to do around town with things like form-based code in Center City, where we are bringing the buildings to the street and putting the parking behind. And this is a graphic that was done probably ahead of its time way back, but it shows the perimeter street, the building on the street, and the parking behind it. That's exactly what we've done. The SPUD incorporates C1, and C1 is a use that is intended to be next to residential. In fact, C1 is the lowest intensity commercial use we have in the City of Norman zoning code. The SPUD adopts those uses as a list into the SPUD and incorporates basically C1 as the uses that would be allowed. And this is out of your zoning code. C1 says it's for the convenience of people of adjacent residential, because these shops and stores may be an integral part of the neighborhood closely associated with residential, religious, recreational. They have more restrictive requirements for light, air, open space, parking, and such. It is intended as a district that is supposed to be next to residential and be that neighborhood commercial kind of use. And in fact, do we have it that way around town? Quite a lot of it, actually. In fact, on Berry Road, in the same mile at Main Street, we have C1 next to R1. It's actually the little building that has the frame shop in it, the trophy shop. There's a picture of it right there. This is Main and Berry. And right next to it, that corner is all C1 with R1 right next to it. Johnny's was also same concept of a C1 parking lot right next to R1. Johnny's is now changed, and I think that's going to be a coffee shop at this point. But C1 right next to residential is right there on Berry right now. Very much a use that's been there for years. I helped zone that project, and I'm not aware of any issues that have come negatively from that. I think they work very well together. There's other areas around town that have C1 right next door to R1. Not unusual at all, and largely because of that paragraph in C1 that says it is a good use adjacent to residential. If you look on the upper left, on the west side, West Robinson and 36th Avenue Northwest, this is very much a C1 site. There is a Dotson's food store right there. This is all C1, and this is R1 right next to it. You have office, CVS, some auto uses, and all of that is right next to R1. If you go to the northeast side of town, Robinson and 12th Avenue, that is all C1. Those are C1 uses that are next to R1, right next door to it, across on East Robinson by 12th Avenue. This is, I think, a Dollar General and some other uses right in there, but that is all zone C1. On the south, you see on the bottom of that graphic, is East Rock Creek Road and 12th Avenue Northeast. That also is all C1 next to R1 neighborhoods. I believe these sites are not developed yet, but they are zoned as C1 and have been that way for many years. And so at any moment, a commercial project could go in there right next to those R1 uses immediately next door. And I would suggest on the C1 sites on all of these, that would allow for multi-story, because these are open district zonings. So these sites that are C1 do not have the restraints that our SPUD would put on them, such as 1 story, such as a 90-foot setback, such as full cutoff lighting with photometric. Well, actually, it might have that from the zoning ordinance, but such as the large landscape buffers. None of these have those restrictions, and yet they are R1 next to C1 in multiple areas around town. So we're doing the same zoning in effect, but with far more restrictions on ours than these would have. It's over-engineered, I think, is the best term for this. We had somebody else tell us that, and Steve Rollins is the civil engineer that has done this work. But we have, again, not required of us to do this, but intentionally so, we have put in LID, which is low-impact development or low-impact design, with BMPs, which is best management practices. And what Steve has done here, this site flows from the north to the south. None of the stormwater would go north into the neighborhood. It all flows to the south and southeast. But what we are doing there very intentionally is we want to do our part. We've kept it 65% impervious, and we are using tree wells right here, tree wells in 2 areas in the top. We have bioretention swales, perforated drain pipes, and if you want to know more about this, Steve is here to answer your questions. I won't go into much deeper detail, but you can see tree wells and bioretention areas. We have some pervious pavers where the bike racks are, and then we have filtration devices before it gets down into the stormwater system of the city of Norman. So we're proud of that. That is a significant advancement. I've seen this done in other places like the Noun Hotel, which also did similar techniques to this and put in a very robust stormwater system. This developer is choosing to do this here. Not required, but we believe adds a significant benefit to the corner and to the city. That's the open space. The open space is 65% maximum as put into the code. We cannot go greater than that. That is the same as R1 single family. So our coverage cannot exceed that. The traffic report. We saw a lot of comments from neighbors and others about traffic. The staff told us we did not have to do a traffic report because the project was too small to require a traffic report. To the developer's credit, they said, well, we are hearing comments about it, let's go do a traffic report. So Mr. B.J. Hawkins with Traffic Engineering Consultants is here to answer any questions you have about traffic. But he did an incomplete study, and he took counts during school while they were in session. And he did the study and did the engineering, and the city staff has reviewed that engineering. And my understanding from that report, again, if you want to ask deeper questions, we welcome you to do that. But the increase on vehicle delay would be less than 2 seconds in the PM peak hour at that intersection. In effect, no impact, no delay of any consequence from this project. And there was no traffic control or geometric roadway improvements necessary. The study found that basically it works as is, and it has the capacity to accommodate this project in full degree. And it's important to note that basically, and this is from the staff report, I believe, it says it's important to note that this will eliminate 3 driveways on Berry Road and reduce them down to just 1. That's a significant benefit. In development world, when we come with projects, city staff is often wanting us to reduce the curb cuts, but you don't have to when you have them. When you have curb cuts, you already have them from prior work, you can keep those. Here, they are choosing to give back 2 of them. And so there would only be 1 curb cut on Berry Road, taken basically as far north as we can take it, away from the intersection, and then only 1 curb cut on Lindsay turned into a right in, right out only, so that it can only be accessed one direction. As to full cutoff lighting, this is what I mentioned. This is the commercial lighting ordinance that's in the books. We've incorporated it so that there's no question as to whether we're under the control of this. And a full cut lighting ordinance, we don't talk about this very often, but this was adopted about 10 years ago in Norman. And it actually is a very important ordinance. It says that it puts forth that you can only have full cutoff fixtures. We call them shoebox fixtures. It has limits on the height of poles. If you want to put poles in the area, they can only be so high. They have to be full cutoff. And I've always thought the most important part of this ordinance is that, and I underline it on the bottom, before you get a building permit, you have to show up with what's called a photometric plan. A photometric plan is a light engineer that takes your lighting design and plots it onto the property, and you cannot exceed, I believe it's probably in there, 0.2 lumens or something like that. The engineer determines how much light falls where on the property and adjacent properties, and you are capped at really very much almost nothing beyond the property. You have to design your lighting system with shields and barriers so that there can be no spillover beyond the property, and the light limits are also a brightness effect. This ordinance will apply to this project. So a couple of final points I want to say is that this area was intentionally revitalized with Lindsay Street, hoping there would be redevelopment. And we've heard a lot of comments about how there's empty spaces on Lindsay Street, and why don't we use the empty spaces? Well, the goal of the Lindsay Street project, and this is staff report, said that the streetscape project was created to help spark redevelopment of West Lindsay Street in this general area. This is your staff writing this about the intention of that Lindsay Street project. And if you recall, Lindsay Street did have a rough effect on some of the businesses in this area, but it was certainly hoped and intended that with the Lindsay Street project, that it would spark new development, new investment, new projects, new users, and new businesses. This is exactly what this project can do. A lot of the new businesses look for new projects like this to go into. It's a good moment for them to open up in a new building and to have that effect. This will spark that. And the staff report also noted that with the exception of the subject property, the corners of the intersection of West Lindsay and South Berry are zoned and designated as commercial. Indeed, this is the only one. This is the only one on that busy intersection that is not zoned commercial. We believe it's appropriate, and more importantly, we believe with all the restraints that we've designed in, it can be done successfully. We had one support letter that we thought was quite notable. This is Mr. Brent Swift. I think everybody knows who Brent is. One of our great treasures of designers in Core Norman. We were actually surprised that Brent wanted to comment on this project, and he did. He submitted a letter yesterday, and he said, and I want to read it to you, it says, as a resident of Ward 4 and a developer of projects throughout Norman's core, I am in support of the proposed rezoning and development for the corner of Berry Road and Lindsay Street. This intersection is the gateway to our city to those visiting the University of Oklahoma. This project will bring new life to this corner that is desperately needed. I also believe the proposed site plan allows for a gentle transition from the busy commercial nature west of the site with the calmer residential aspect to the east of the site. I think Brent's done great work. The Logan Apartments and other projects he has done in Norman are heavily commented on as great projects in our community, and we were really very honored to get that letter from Brent on this project. He is not affiliated with this project, but he felt passionate enough to write that comment about it. And so with that, I would close with just a summary of it. Again, we've tried very hard to change this project and evolve it and put it into a position where it covers all of the issues that we have heard about. Everything that we could address, we addressed. Bringing the building forward, putting in a 90-foot building setback of no building area except for the parking, putting in massive landscape setbacks, maintaining those trees on the north and the south, height of only 1 story. C1 is typically 2 to 3 stories. Low impact development stormwater, which did not have to be done, and the ride in and ride out. We're proud of the design. I think Rick Mckinney did great work. We're proud of the way it came out in a residential sloped shingled roof. And with that, we believe that we've done what we can to make this project a good one. We ask for your support, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Moving to any questions for the applicant?
Yes. Lighting. You talk about parking lot lighting, zero cutoff lighting. What about lighting on the building?
And I apologize that Rick is not here because he could probably talk about it better, but I'll show you the elevations. I think he did show some lighting on the elevations. He does show a little bit of lighting. You can see some of the light fixtures right in here, Commissioner Beck. He will be required, I don't know if those show full cutoff. In fact, it doesn't look like they do, but by ordinance, he would have to do full cutoff
I
fixtures.
was thinking that was included.
It is.
The parking lot lighting and building lighting.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay.
Full cutoff. Yes.
Okay.
Full cutoff in every way would be required, regardless of what you see on that. The ordinance verbiage itself says it.
Any other questions for the applicant? I know we have quite a few audience
you.
comments. Thank you. Anybody who has not already filled out a slip, there are slips over at the corner there that you can, I'm sorry, on the cart. On the cart, you can fill out with your name and address on there, and I'll call you up one at a time so that you can make your presentation and make your comments. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes each. I will tell you from past experience that time does go very quickly. If you would like a kind of alert that you have about 30 seconds remaining, I'd be glad to provide that for you. Otherwise, I will yield the full 3 minutes to you to speak, but then at the end of the 3 minutes, I'm going to thank you and ask the next person to come up. So just so everybody knows what to expect with that. And then beginning with Jim Akey.
My name is Jim Akey. I live on 819 Cary Drive. I'm opposed to this. I understand the romance of looking at all of the pretty pictures that have been brought before us today. But in fact, what you're voting on is changing this to a commercial property. And once you decide that, it could just as easily be a Chuck E. Cheese. And for 40 years, the shopping center to the west has been denied access to Berry Road. And all of a sudden, a shopping center to the east is okay. That strikes me as being problematic. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to apologize because I'm probably going to pronounce some names wrong, but I have a David Neherens. Thank you. And again, just say your name and your address, and if you want the warning, let me know. Otherwise, you'll get the full time.
My name is David Nairns. I live at 902 Cary Drive, and we're in Ward 4. We're within the 350-foot boundary, so we received the letter. The reason we're opposed, my wife and I, to this being rezoned, Our house and the house next to us will be the backyards that will back right up to this commercial development, so we'll be the closest of all the homes to it. Now, this was presented last year, and because the presentation last year was very similar, the application was very similar, I have 22 protest letters here that were sent last year. Many of these people were under the impression that this still applied to today. So when the protest map came out last year, it wasn't 12.5, it was 20.1%, which is shown here. And many of these people, because we don't receive any notification when it's rescheduled, those people may not be here, but it was 20% last year. We do not want a development with 55 parking spaces right behind our house. And you notice on the design for the parking lot, the revised traffic impact analysis does not address the impact that the driveways will have as cars are exiting or entering through the driveways. It doesn't address the fact that they're coming onto 2-lane streets, not 4-way. The traffic already backs up. Everybody that lives there knows that when you're coming down south on Berry, the city didn't put a right turn lane in. The traffic backs up sometimes all the way to Brooks. This people coming to take a left to turn in, we believe is going to cause a backup, and it's 2 lanes that these driveways are on, not 4 lanes. Also, you notice, because we've been looking at this for 5 years, if you go over to those houses, they've been preparing this before you ever voted on this. The one house, they took down 11 mature trees, were simply cut down. This is being groomed and developed, getting ready to be developed before you even voted on this. They're just assuming you're going to approve this. The cars in the parking lot will be constantly going in and out, and we live right there. We don't want the exhaust, the noise, the light pollution in our backyards. As Mr. Akey said, after you approve it for commercial, if you do, it could be sold to anyone. And particularly, having a 6-foot privacy fence is something you put up in the backyard of a residence.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Instead, it should be an 8-foot solid brick wall all the way around the whole thing in the north and east. That would show care for the neighborhood. So the Planning Commission, this is really simple. Do you want these houses removed so it's an extension of Lindsay Street East, or do you want to leave these properties in place so it extends the residential area down Berry Road to Lindsay? We oppose this. We ask that you reject it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Moving to Roxana Meyer.
Good evening. I live on Brook Street and pretty much on the corner. I lived on Cary Drive all my life. Berry Road is a 2-lane street that is extremely busy. It is a main thoroughfare for fire trucks and ambulances to get to south of Lindsay. This will only restrict the time that they will be able to get to care for thousands of people in the residents south of Lindsay. And I am also a commercial business owner, and there are many, many businesses that are empty, and this will only add more emptiness to those that are trying to rent their properties. And we have had to, because of so much development, overdevelopment in Norman, we have had to reduce our rents to keep our renters in our buildings. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Michelle, and I know you just said this, and I apologize. You have to say it for me. Narens, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Narens. My father spoke before me. I reside in 906 Cary Drive, which is the closest property to the 1035 South Berry Road property. That is one of the ones that's being included in this proposal. I am adamantly against this for many, many reasons. But essentially what it boils down to is rezoning doesn't really do anything to support or build up the neighbors that are around it. Obviously, it brings more traffic, more noise. Part of the problem that I have with the fact that a traffic study was done, it doesn't actually show what it might be like with this addition. We have heard that 20,000 cars come through that intersection every day with properties there that aren't being used. So when you then add commercial property that is bringing hundreds of cars in a day, that's only going to make it worse. On top of that, this has been brought up year after year, which obviously they have their absolute right to bring this up to be proposed. But clearly there's a reason that we've continued to shoot this down. The residences around it don't want this. We've been trying to explain our issues with it, and they've come up with different proposals, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't want commercial property backing up to my backyard. I don't want to sit in my backyard and listen to cars or have lights spill over smelling exhaust. I know that they moved the dumpsters, but the fact is that I'm definitely against it. As was also stated before me, there's tons of commercial property around Norman that isn't being used, that tenants can't come in. So why are we building more commercial property when there's already properties around Norman that people can't keep tenants in? Essentially, they stated that, oh, well, we're removing 3 driveways from the roads. But again, think about driving down Lindsay Street where it narrows to 1 lane and someone tries to turn left into that property. Cars are going to start backing up. They're going to block the intersection because no one actually stops to leave a gap in the intersection. So it's a huge concern to me that the traffic is going to get significantly worse. It's not something that the residences want. And I don't know that I have much else to say to other, but thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate you listening to our concerns.
Thank you. Moving to Gabrielle Manderville? Manville? Mandyville?
I submitted a letter of protest already, and so I don't have very much to add to it, except that when I
Your
heard
name and
about
address,
beautiful,
please?
I'm sorry,
Your name and address, please.
905 Cary Drive.
Thank you.
I'm the second closest house to this project, and so this is very important to me. What stunned me a while ago at this presentation was the word beautification. There is no beautification in encroaching into a neighborhood that's been there forever. I owned my house since 1972, and it is unimaginable for this to happen, and we don't understand why it is happening there. There are empty businesses in every strip mall in Norman. There are 2 other corners on Berry and Lindsay that are available, as far as I'm concerned, a deserted gas station. Why encroach in our neighborhood? This is, anyway, that was a result of the... What is concerning to me is that there appears to be a close connection with the people who own the houses that are going to be torn down with the developer. Every one of these residents is connected in some way to this project. So it gives reason for thought. And excuse me, if I start coughing, it's because I've developed an allergy to this project. I don't have much to add to it, except that it does not make sense. And we're just asking for this to be not approved because of our neighborhood. We have a great little neighborhood, and it should stay that way. If the city has any consideration for their citizens, please do not approve this. It is not a matter of need. I believe it's a matter of greed. And that seems to be prevalent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've got Dan Maines from 1128 West Brooks.
Thanks. I would appreciate the 30-second heads up. So my name is Dan Maines, 1128 Westbrook. So I'm not in the official protest area, but I'm strongly opposed to this project. I think, as others have pointed out, the simple question is, do we need more development in this space? And the answer is absolutely not. There's already so much space on Lindsay available for development. There's plenty of space for new businesses. The attorney has suggested that adding development here will somehow revitalize that neighborhood, but we really haven't seen any evidence of that for the particular space of Lindsay Street and in that environment. So we really don't have any evidence that that would take place. On the other hand, this is clearly going to destroy the quality of life of the residents in this neighborhood. Light pollution, sound pollution, air pollution, this is all bad for mental health as well as physical health. So it's going to endanger the people living here. The logic of simply just extending a line, that doesn't really make sense. Just because a line can be drawn there, we don't do urban planning based on symmetry. It should be based on the needs of the city, and there's no need for a new strip mall in this area. I do appreciate the steps that the developers have made to mitigate stormwater, but new parking spaces are still going to generate massive amounts of stormwater. That's all going to flow into Imhoff Creek. Imhoff Creek, as we know, the Imhoff Bridge went out recently. That was a result of stormwater. The Imhoff Creek watershed already has the highest level of impervious surfaces of any creek in Norman. This is going to just exacerbate that with 55 new parking spaces plus the new roof. So that's going to be a major issue. Also south of Imhoff Road, there's massive erosion due to the stormwater in Imhoff Creek. So that's another issue that needs to be considered. So again, I think just when you look at the benefits to this, it's not something we need. It's going to detract from other businesses. The detriments, major negative impacts on the residents, stormwater problems, traffic problems. I would really encourage you to vote no against this project.
Thank you. Lara Souza from 823 Cary Drive.
My name is Lara Souza. I live on 823 Cary Drive. My spouse and I moved there when my daughter was a year old. We really love the neighborhood and we are strongly opposing to this development. I would argue that the buffer proposed alongside with the paved parking lots is not a really good improvement on the north side of the property. And in fact, the question I have to ask you is, how will this impact adjacent properties? You know, the developer proposed that the property is not appropriate right now, especially on the north side as a R1 property. So how will that make developing that side the R1 adjacent properties? Will they become C1s in the future? Where will we draw the line? The next thing, I don't buy that the traffic is not gonna change or it's, you know, there's gonna be an improvement. How do you add a business to that intersection? And even with having just reducing the driveways, that traffic is gonna be reduced. I don't believe in that. So I opposed the development, and I appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Dennis Yarborough from 803 South Berry Road.
Good evening. I'm Dennis Yarborough at 803 South Berry Road. When I retired from 30 years of working for a municipality, my wife said she wanted to move back to her hometown here in Norman. That's where her family was. That's where she was raised. So we purchased a property just north of Lindsay and Berry with the idea that we were moving into a stable neighborhood. We invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. We're making improvements. And when someone asked the city to break a covenant, which is what zoning actually is between the residents and the commercial and everyone, when they ask the city to break a covenant that allows uses that were not planned in the future, when we bought the property, that's a problem. And so had we known that this was coming, we probably wouldn't have bought here. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to actually drive people away when they see, if this passes, how little the city pays attention to the existing zoning that's been there for decades. You have to listen to what the sales pitch said, but you also have to listen to what the sales pitch didn't say. And that's something I learned a long time ago. For instance, there's 4 identical letters of support in here. I don't think any of those people that signed those letters live in this neighborhood. I don't think Hal Smith is a neighbor of mine. I don't think Hunter Miller is a neighbor of mine. Carol West, who owns the property immediately north of this, is listed as a principal on Sooner Traditions website. And it's been that way. And that's where the trees were cut down that was mentioned before. They're getting this ready for dominoes to start falling as soon as this gets approved. I expect their enthusiastic support of this project might evaporate if it was going to be adjacent to their backyard. So I don't think they'd want it in their backyard, but it's okay for someone else's. What's also not being said is that numerous letters didn't show up. Some of that's because there was a misunderstanding. The last time I was here, the city attorney called me the next day and said we had till Friday to turn in letters. Then we discovered today that to be in the protest map generation and show up on the part that was presented, they had to be in last Wednesday instead of last Friday. Many of the residents who did write those letters are here. Many of those residents have invested heavily in the neighborhood and their families. They're raising children there. They're sharing their lives there. What's not being said is rezoning should be for the benefit of citizens, not just greedy speculation and profit at the expense of someone else's quiet enjoyment of the property that they invested in. It makes families less likely to stay. Why not turn those properties into homes again? When he talks about a natural line extending to the east, the more natural line is to go back to what was there for decades and make that all residential. That's the natural line. So this is wrong for this property. It's wrong for the neighborhood, and it's wrong for Norman. Actions like this is what leads to more urban blight and empty space.
Ms. Yarbrough, that's your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Susan Meyer, 808 Cary Drive.
My name is Susan Meyer. I live at 808 Cary Drive. And I'm also a business owner here in Norman. This is about the most unfriendly business thing you could possibly do. You will be adding to the glut of vacant commercial properties. For what? What business? Have they told you what business? No. For what purpose? Look at what that glut has already done to our business insurance rates. This proposal is requesting ingress and egress off of Berry Street. And it already has very high traffic counts. You heard that from the developer. The city denied ingress and egress onto Berry for the new pediatric center on Boyd. That's how important Berry is for ambulances and fire trucks to get to our area. If you look at the map, look at the density of the residents in that area. To maintain traffic flow, the city made MidFirst Bank. They made CVS put in full go-ahead turn, pull-aside turn lanes into their businesses to prevent traffic flow problems. I want you to see how pretty the pictures are, but I want you to flip that over into the vacant things across the street, or flip it the other way and do it catty corner on the vacant commercial properties that's already zoned commercial. That's what really needs to be done. To most business owners like myself, zoning is a business contract. It's a contract between the city and its residents. There are terms, there are conditions, there are expectations. The existing business community has sunk thousands and hundreds and more thousands of dollars based on their zoning contract with the city. Please realize that zoning actually sets location. It sets your customer base. It sets your traffic flows. That's what business is about. Does this protect Norman's existing businesses? No. Does it protect the commercially zoned properties? No. We all know that retail really is changing. I mean, all of us business owners know that. The age of the mall and the strip mall is pretty much going to go by the wayside, and we realize that. Please protect me, protect my business and keep our safety forward-looking and our future well-being in mind, because that's your part of the zoning contract that we have with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Steve Maple from 951 Southbury Road.
Steve Maple, 951 Southbury Road. My wife and I oppose this development for many of the same reasons that our neighbors have put forth. Berry Street right here is a residential neighborhood. And while it is true that there are commercial properties on the other three corners of the intersection, there is actually no ingress and egress on this block from the west at this point. Traffic regularly backs up, southbound traffic on Berry regularly backs up to Brooks, and traffic going east on Lindsay at this point basically is where the street is going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and it regularly backs up into that intersection. So while the applicant is arguing that because there are already developments on the other 3 corners of this intersection, that's a reason to develop this corner, I think that's the best reason not to develop this particular corner. I think you only have to look at those other developments that are C1 to see what we're liable to see in 50 years. So, thank you.
Thank you. Judith Wilkins, 1100 West Sims. Judith Wilkins, is Judith Wilkins here? We can circle back, and it will make another opportunity for anybody who hadn't put their card in to speak. I've got Kevin Coneyworthy at 1132 West Brooks.
So Kevin Coneyworthy, 1132 West Brooks. I live on the corner of Brooks and Berry, and where that intersection is, where like everybody says, those 2 streets are 2 lane, right? Turning in there. Traffic does back up all the way up to Brook Street at certain times during the day. Also, what I have not heard anybody mention is foot traffic and bicycle traffic. We have students that go to walk to Alcott every morning, every afternoon. They're walking home. My son has almost been hit by a car. I've had neighbors whose kids have almost been hit by cars at that intersection. About twice a month, we have big car wrecks right there at that intersection of Brooks and Berry. I hear it twice a month. I'm sitting in there in my living room. I hear the cars hit. That is a problem. You don't need to increase that problem by putting this business there, because that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a ripple effect of traffic problems that are going to come from this. Also, bike traffic. You have a lot of college students that live in that area. They ride their bikes to school. I've seen almost, students almost get hit. Skateboarders, people going to class. So there is a problem there. And this is going to increase that problem. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back around for Judith Wilkins, or if anybody else that has not already submitted a card and would like to make any comment. Okay. Seeing no additional ones. Oh, there we go. Nolita Morgan from 1027 Madison Street.
So I live, I think, just outside of the notification. But my property is on Madison Street, right across the creek from this development. And I'm concerned about the creek flooding more. My kids also use that bike path. My son goes to Alcott, has almost been hit twice. We were thrilled to have a bike path, but that intersection is very congested. I have seen people looking at their phones, hauling ass down Berry Street, not paying attention. I think this will only add to the problems. The safety and the pollution are my concerns. My house has been there since 1952. I've lived there. I moved my family there 15 years ago to be in this diverse, wonderful neighborhood. We started the Pickard Acres Neighborhood Watch Association. We're a tight group. I don't live as close as most of these people, but this is my neighborhood. This is where I live. I ask you to deny this. I'm totally protesting this for my family, for our quality of life. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I will comment.
If you
David Drury. I live at 951 South Berry. My husband already spoke. I just have a couple of things to point out. Really just want to emphasize what she said is, if you think it's just, blah, 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 right? On the pictures and the trees and wrapping. I'm sure they spent a lot of money on those plans, but they're completely meaningless. The only thing in front of you guys is to change the zoning. Once they change the zoning, does anybody believe that the two lots to the east, we're not going to be back here in a year or whenever turning those to commercial? Because you got to continue the line, right? So if y'all really want to see all of Lindsay to Imhoff Creek be turned commercial, this is your first domino. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, we'll move to Planning Commission discussion. For the sake of disclosure, I also want to point out that I did have a meeting with the developer in advance, as well as several other commissioners in here. I did also go back and reread the last time that this came before us in 2020 and had looked at those notes. And I did notice that many of the people that submitted protests and came here spoke today also were here previously. So I do thank you for coming back multiple times and for having put your letters in more than one occasion to continue to come before us. So.
Someone's got to start. I guess I'll start. This is Commissioner Jablonski. Overall, I like what I've seen in the project. I like that they're preserving mature trees. I appreciate that they're using landscape as buffers on the north and the east and the building setback. I agree that C1 should serve residential. I think that's good. I personally think it would look good to have 4 commercial zones right there at an intersection, but the people who live there, they don't want it, and so then I look and say, okay, well, what's going on with the commercial around it? Is there a need to put more commercial? If there weren't vacant commercial right next to this area, then it would be easier to support this, but there is vacant commercial, and so if there's a need to serve that community, why not redevelop the commercial that's already there instead of making new development by changing the zone? And that question, I'd be happy to have the developer address this question because I don't develop, and so I'm happy to have a developer speak to this if they want to.
I'd allow that, yep.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Jablonski. Sorry about that. I appreciate that question. We hear that a lot. We just heard a lot from this crowd. Development is is a redevelopment or revitalization of a lot of things. You could say that about many different districts. Oftentimes, it is a lot more expensive to revitalize. I think those involved in development would know that, that it's expensive to revitalize buildings. Also, and a key point on this intersection, you have to have a willing seller to do that. And there's a few folks in Norman that don't sell their properties. And there's one right by this. I don't want to get into specifics, but that hasn't ever sold that property and probably won't ever sell that property. And so if that seller is not willing to sell that property that has vacant spaces, you can't do anything about it. I'll give you another example. I got a call last week about a project, not a commercial, but a project that has been vacant with vagrants in it for years. And this is a large multifamily project near the university. I know multiple people, including my office, that has made attempts to buy that property. This property is literally falling down. They won't sell it. They won't sell it to anyone. They'll let it just collapse, basically, eventually, which it probably will. So if you don't have willing sellers and owners of those properties that are vacant that you're talking about, it doesn't matter what the developer wants to do or what you want that developer to do, it won't be revitalized. It won't be supported. But I do believe, from my experience and what I've seen in communities and urban planning, is that if you put new investment, new resources next to it and near it that do fill up with new uses and vibrant, active uses, that it puts pressure on those properties to eventually do something with them. It puts pressure on those properties to revitalize, to reinvest, to do something. And it also increases values on those properties to where eventually maybe somebody can reach the moment where they do sell it. So I think there is an effect there. What's the alternative? That you don't do anything and you let the house simply sit there boarded up? You let the little house that was Castleberry's office and so forth do as it is? I don't think you would see significant reinvestment. I don't think you would see pressure on the property very nearby, I will say, to resell and redevelop. I don't think you would get that new investment and pressure to do so. That's what you tend to see in reality in commercial properties, is reinvestment sparks reinvestment. Non-reinvestment dilapidates down into deterioration. That's my experience. That's what I've seen. I hope that answers your question.
Commissioner Blancy, did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say something? So in speaking to the commercial property vacancies, I'm not a developer, obviously. I am a realtor. And there is a lot of commercial property vacancy in Norman. But I think it's important to look at, it's not an apples to apples comparison. You can't take, in my opinion, you can't take the property across the street and the vacancies in it and compare it to new build properties. When you have a business that's looking for a place to land, they're going to look at a specific place for their business. And if I'm looking for my business, I'm going to compare it. Like, what's the best use for my business? Where's the highest and best usage for me to go? And if I see something dilapidated versus something new, I'm going to pick the best place for myself. And that's the same with zoning. We want the highest and best usage. So the old Castleberry office was on the MLS, and it was in the residential usage, and I sent it to several clients. And none of them, they loved the location. The price was very, very high, and for that price, they weren't interested. It needed too much work, and none of them even wanted to go see it. So taking that into consideration, I don't think it would be used as a home. Whoever bought it, if they kept it residential, would have to tear it down, in my opinion. I don't know everybody. I don't know who would buy it, but I do think this is a good use for the property. I hear your complaints. I understand them. I owned a home where an apartment building was built, and I protested it. That's why I'm on Planning Commission. I hear you. But I do think the developer is listening to concerns. I voted against this twice, And I do like the changes. I appreciate the listening and what has been done. I think it's a good usage for this location.
Okay. Dave Beck, Commissioner, also an architect, also a professor of architecture at the University of Oklahoma. And I've been involved in many commercial and residential projects in my career. I too voted against this before, but I'm also pleased with the response that the developers have given. Lee Hall and I have talked about this project numerous times, and our vision was that the developer of this piece of property and the maybe developer of the 3 acres just to the east of this, who is looking at doing residential, could get together and create something that we haven't seen in Norman, where you have separate little pieces and parcels of land. It hadn't happened, but I see this as one, I agree with you, some properties, just the highest and best use is too expensive for the business that wants to be in it. And I agree with you that sometimes redevelopment is too expensive, and one of the things I see in Norman is there's lots of people that own really old real estate that don't want to do anything with it and don't do anything with it, and so it just sits there. And that's part of the reason we have lots of real estate that hasn't been redeveloped. And I've also seen where new development spurs redevelopment. And because people that own properties that have sat on them and really don't care, they've got lots of money, so they don't really care about whether they have tenants or not. But if businesses move to a piece of property that's more advantageous and more attractive and works better, they'll move out of those old pieces of property and move into the new pieces of property, which force old property owners to do something with their property. So in the long haul, I see that as creating an improvement. So, I mean, I'd still like to see something, but I don't think anybody in that neighborhood is going to like to see any development on any of that 3 or 4.5 acres anyhow, because it's all going to back up to where they live. And my interest is creating places that will support neighborhood businesses and that improve the looks of intersections and neighborhoods. And so I tend to feel like I'm going to support this.
I have a comment actually to address Commissioner Jablonski in general, because one of the things many of the protest letters and many of your comments were regarding the vacant spaces and the other corners that could have been developed instead. As far as costs for redevelopment, anytime you have a gas station, that is one of the most expensive places to redevelop because of those gas tanks. It requires a much higher environmental study to even get a loan on it. A lot of times you have to do what's called a phase 1, or in some cases phase 2 environmentals. Those buried gas tanks are problems. They create issues. So that was really just to address your question. Those are going to be more expensive than just tearing down a building, because you now have to deal with that, digging those up and making sure you're appropriately disposing of those in a way that they should be. I just wanted to mention that. Since you guys didn't hear the presentation and my comments that I made to the developer initially, I was going to share with those. I took some notes down on here. Some things that I did read in one of the letters also about the curb cuts. I do think 1 curb cut is better than 3 for the traffic flow, but there was a very good comment that it is an ingress and egress, which is effectively working like 2 curb cuts. So I do think that's a valid point to consider just when we're looking at apples to apples. Also on that line of development, I know there's the 2025 plan, but there is a little bit of a buffer besides just going C1 to R1 in those apartment complexes to the south. So it's not exactly the same. You have a lot of buffer for commercial office and for apartments, which is to buffer out between that R1 and that C1 currently, and this would be putting C1 to R1. It's just a fact I think that is worth pointing out to counter your point on there. Something else I want to mention is, this was voted down twice. One of the comments I made is the first time that this came before us, it was just for a rezoning to C1. It was not for a PUD. And I didn't feel like it was a very well thought out rezoning at all. And so I think that's why it was unanimously voted down that time. This is now, being a PUD is a specific project. It has restrictions on it. And this corner had a lot of needs that were very specific. And I don't think that a general rezoning is appropriate for here. I do think a PUD is the right kind of use so that you can approve a specific building and a specific project. I always like to see a developer willing to listen and adjust to those neighbors. That's huge for me, moving that patio, moving that dumpster, putting that landscape buffer on there. One of the comments I made is somebody is going to have to live next to a parking lot still. And what are you doing? And I don't like to see cars from streets any more than anybody else. So I made the comment that I'd like to see some shrubbery on Berry that's going in front of the cars that you would see as you're driving down on Berry, for example. So you don't see those. Other than that, I do like the restricted turns on Lindsay. I think that's a much safer way than what the previous time in 2020 that we looked at that would look at. The bus stop and having some sidewalks is a nice feature as well. The lighting, I know that we have ordinances specifically addressing those. So that's really where you have protections on there and meeting into those lighting concerns. So making sure that, that's really where the lighting kind of comes in. So I was very apprehensive about a strip mall. I would prefer to see probably a single building here and probably maybe something commercial office on where it's R1 now, something a little lighter. But I also didn't buy this property. And, we can all think about what we would like to see, but what is actually being able to be done. That was something I did put in consideration. And making sure that this is still the case, but there were no storefronts on Berry. That's pretty significant. They had, I think, one door for mechanical access only, but no doors at all on Berry Road. That, from a vantage point for commercial property, is not adding value to that property. The best use is as many street frontages as possible, get doors out there so people can walk in them. So I think that was a significant consideration to adjust this project, to bring that height down and to use residential materials that we could actually see this time. It just felt more purposeful this time around. So those were some of the comments that I had from this previously and wanted to share those. So. All right, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion for a vote.
Move to approve.
Second.
And the vote.
You may vote. Okay, everyone has voted, and the motion carried 5-1.
Okay, moving to our next agenda item, number 4, O-2122-21. Johnson and Associates, on behalf of University North Park, requests amendment of the existing PUD planned unit development 1415-45 to amend the allowable uses for approximately 1.37 acres of property located on the east side of 24th Avenue Northwest, south of Tecumseh Road. And I'll take the staff vote. Oh, I'm sorry, the motion is to postpone. So do we have to make a motion to postpone it? Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, and a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion to postpone carried 6-0.
Moving to miscellaneous discussion, does staff have any information for commission?
I would note next month's meeting is on the 3rd Thursday instead of the 2nd Thursday, because the 11th is a holiday.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Commissioners' comments?
Well, my only comments is, of course, everybody else has left, is I really was hoping that I could get these two developers together to create kind of a unified development on that corner, and I'm still hoping that maybe we can. Did you really meet with Hunter Miller?
He was on, it was a Zoom call, and he
Okay.
was on it, yeah.
'Cause I've never seen him. I don't even know what he looks like.
I'll be totally honest, if he was here, I don't know if I could pick him out of the crowd.
Okay. But
I have a quick thought, and I'm sorry, I know people have stuff to do. It was a long meeting.
That's okay.
When things are rezoned through us and then city council approves them and then the plans change, I wish that there was a way that we could amend the rules so that it has to come back all the way through planning and
I
city
agree.
council. The apartment complex I referenced was approved through planning commission and city council as a 2-story, and it is a gigantic 3-story that looms over Cascade. And I think that it was a bait and switch, and I think that that should not happen. And so if there's a way that it could be looked at and somehow changed, I know we can't do that, but I think.
yeah, we're just an advisory board. We can't.
I
do
know,
that.
but while we have people listening, if there is a way to change that, I think it would be better for Norman, and those are my 2 cents.
People would trust Norman a lot more, you know, that.
I agree. This is, I mean, this is one of the nice things about a SPUD. It locks in what's gonna happen. So this thing we just voted on, it's gonna be 1 story tall, and that's fixed. It's not going to change. To your point,
Yeah,
if
exactly.
it were C1, then they could show us really pretty pictures.
Now, I've seen
and then-
PUDs change over time. Once a PUD happens, and then all of a sudden something comes back because they couldn't lease it out, and then they come back to change a PUD. So the old adage, once you let something happen, it's gonna cascade on down the road. Unfortunately, we let that happen more than it should happen.
And that may be even just something that staff can help us with in the presentations, is when there's been changes to those PUDs, you know, maybe make sure to, I don't know, you may already do this, and if you do, I apologize, but just highlight those changes. This project that we voted on actually had a change from the pre-development meeting that I was able to ask the developer about. But it's only because I went and I looked at that pre-development meeting, and, you know, the applicant isn't necessarily gonna always point those out. So any of those changes are very helpful for us to be aware of, because that may not have been something the audience had a comment to make. But to that effect, sometimes the comments from these planning commission meetings are taken in to make adjustments, and the Norman Regional, I don't know what they're calling it, the Highway 9 Hospital is a great example of that. They continued to change and to, what I would venture to say, improve based
Right.
on the comments they had from there. So I'd like to still be able to see PUDs be able to be changed, but I think it should be very clear for the next person voting on it what changed, so that they can ask why.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
If it's considered 2 applications, I'm not sure we can discuss a previous application in our staff report. Like, this was technically a separate application from the last time it went through.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys are talking about when they come back to you
Right.
for a rezoning, they're asking, so if they amend a PUD from what it was to what it will be, is that what you're talking about?
I think.
Between
I
planning
understood
commission
that
and
you were
council.
talking about when it changes through the process, after it's been voted on from planning commission and then goes to city council, and there's a change between there. That's what I was understanding it as.
Or even,
Well, and we do, when we, when we amend the staff report after planning commission, if something has happened here that the commission has asked the applicant to change, or even if they get a negative vote here and they realize that some of the things that you mentioned that you wanted changed, they will make those changes, and we note that on the staff report that's amended as it goes forward to city council.
Yeah, and that's also maybe just good tips for us too,
well,
like when we.
that brings up a whole nother point, and Lee and I have talked about this. I'm her favorite planning commissioner, because I'm also in Ward 4. And if we set
Favorites.
this up so that each city council person had a ward person on the planning commission, there might be more discussion between planning commissioners and city council people to allow that dialogue to happen, because I've always had a problem with how little dialogue we as planning commissioners have with city council.
And you've been on here long enough, Commissioner Beck. Didn't it used to be like that?
No.
Years ago, back when Eva.
Not when I got on, it wasn't
But
like that.
before that.
Yeah, well, that's,
Doesn't the ward?
Yeah, and I think it. Mhm.
I think that's just a great idea.
Mhm. I know Greenbelt's like that, and I thought that years and years ago, Planning Commission was like that. I could be wrong, but.
But I think every planning commissioner ought to be able to go over to a city council person's house for coffee every Sunday and just chit chat. You know, it really helps.
What ward is not represented?
So we have, I think Sandy's also Ward 4, am I mistaken? Lark, maybe Lark is also Ward 4.
I think we got 2 and 1.
We have some duplicates.
We're almost there.
3, I'm also 3.
Great, okay.
So we don't, it's not a ward specific currently, but I know that there's been some discussion of making that a change.
Do it.
But, I mean,
You can have.
I would think it'd be easy
Can't leave.
if we really narrowed and focused in on it to get a ward-specific planning commissioner.
And just to that effect, I worked very hard to reach out to a lot of people when we had this opening to get a lot of applicants for planning commission as soon as we had an opening. So I know many applications have been submitted, but that was also something that was told to me as being a consideration then in selecting if it was going to go ward-specific. But if, same thing, it's available online, but you have to put in the application just like we did. So if, put it out there for people so that they can apply, and then that we have a pool of people to pick from every ward, because what you can run into a problem with is if you don't have any applicants, or you only have one applicant, and maybe it's not your strongest applicant from that ward, so.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well.
All right.
Thank you.
Any,
To adjourn.
yeah, okay, motion to adjourn.